very much. It's the first time that I'm in Ireland. I haven't been in Ireland before. I only have been in Irish pubs in Greek islands, but not in Ireland. So it's a very good opportunity for me and for everybody from Greece to compare the situation, the current situation in your country, with the situation in our country, in Greece. And I want to thank Elena for the introduction, but also for the honor of inviting me to your conference. And let me congratulate you for its success, because in a single day you made it possible to deconstruct the so-called success story that, with great effort, the conservatives in Europe have tried to build at the conference of EPP, European People's Party, which was concluded only last Friday here in Dublin. The conference that, as you know, selected Mr. Jean-Claude Juncker as the party's candidate for the presidency of the European Commission. And I think that this is not a single candidate. It is a candidacy that personifies austerity. It is a choice of Angela Merkel and Anna Kennedy, your Prime Minister, and also the choice of the Greek Prime Minister, Mr. Tsipras. So, I congratulate you that it took you only one day to deconstruct the success story of the neoliberal consensus. A story which, since last December, has been sitting in your own country, in Ireland, in posthumous phase. In Ireland, that is a country with the public debt as a percentage of the GDP at 64% in 2009, that is already high compared to 25% in 2007, and came out of it at twice that figure, 125% of GDP in 2013. So what a marvelous success story. It is true that banks were rescued at the price of a memorandum that dismantled the country's social fabric and doubled the country's public debt. So, dear friends, why I'm talking about the EPP, the European People's Party conference? Because the succession of the two conferences, the conference of the European People's Party, that is the conference for the Europe of austerity and fear, and your own conference, the conference, let me say, for the Europe of hope and change, it is a succession of alternative choices. And the final dilemma in the polls in May is this: it's either them or the people. Because for the first time next May, the vote of every citizen anywhere in Europe counts as never before. It is a vote with power and dynamics. It can and should change the course of Europe. Today, the neoliberalism and the German hegemony have led Europe to a strategic dead end. Today, that it has been proved on the ground that the policy of internal devaluation has failed, today that social cohesion is under threat. And not only cohesion, let me say, but democracy as well. Today that the very future of the European Union is under threat, it is imperative, as never before, that the peoples of Europe put an end to this recipe of failure, to a recipe that divides and destroys the European continent. And it divides it not only in terms of a surplus north and a deficit south, but also through a new wall of money between the creditors and the debtors. A wall of money which produces societies of the two-thirds, with one-third acting as if there were no crisis, and is getting richer from the crisis at the expense of the two-thirds pushed into poverty and social exclusion. The two-thirds of the lower classes and of the former middle class. This is a reality, and this is a reality made by austerity and memorandum. The same reality and prospect which we will all judge on election day in May 25. This time, people's vote can change the balance of political forces in Europe. And by the shifting it to the left, a green light could be lit in Europe for solidarity and democracy. A green light for the Europe of the left, and a red light for Mrs. Merkel's Europe of today. Such a change in the balance of forces would also determine the political direction of the solution to the crisis. Because the crisis is far from over. It is still underway, recited by the neoliberal policies, and so long as it is recited, the process of European integration is undermined, and the Eurozone itself is threatened. Because the policies of internal devaluation are not the solution of the crisis. They are the crisis. That's why we need to get over with those policies right now. And the European elections are the great opportunity for the people to send a very clear message of austerity rejection and clear answers to the dilemmas of the bailout box. Which are then those dilemmas that the European citizens will be asked to respond to in May 25? First dilemma: have the memoranda failed or not throughout Europe? Are the memoranda of austerity really success stories for Greece, Ireland, and other countries? Or is it the case that they have brought back economic stagnation and social misery to Europe? Second dilemma: how are we going to get out of the crisis? By repeating the same mistake of the failed recipe, austerity and each country on its own, or with solidarity and growth in the footsteps of the 1953 London Summit, London Debt Conference, which cancelled 60% of German debt? And the third dilemma: what kind of Europe do we want? That of Mrs. Merkel or the one of the left? Mrs. Merkel's Europe, which is not working, a Europe of austerity and poverty, or the Europe of the left, the Europe of employment, of human rights, of solidarity and democracy? Dear friends, I think that the answer that each of us will give to those three dilemmas at the ballot box, our own answer in May, will save our own life and our children's lives tomorrow and in the years to come. In May, we will vote not for some parties, not for the balances at the national level, but we will vote for our life, based on the experiences of our lives so far. But of course, I'm not here to talk about your lives. You know better than me what happened in your lives. And today among you, as a citizen of a country which is under a memorandum and is addressing citizens who know very well the meaning of that word, what means memorandum. And in that sense, as one of you, I ask myself, is today's Ireland a success story? Or is it just a dead cat's bounce, as the Economist described it last December? Last Friday, your fellow countryman, the U2's Bono, addressing to the European EPP party, the European People's Party conference, and he said, Troika screwed up the Irish, but we made it. So I think that Bono said only the half truth. Only half the truth. The other half is that the ones who made it were not the Irish, were not the Greeks, were not the Europeans, but were the European banks and the global bondholders. And let me explain why this is the whole truth. Let's see how exactly our two countries made it. How is it today, 3 years later, the original problem which the memorandum was supposed to resolve in Ireland? Mortgage debt is far worse than it was 3 years ago. 1 in 5 home loans worth 25 billion euros and falling behind. Most of them for more than 3 months. At the same time, the ratio of household debt to their disposable income still is 197%. As I mentioned earlier, public debt as a percentage of GDP was almost doubled in 2013, relative to 2009 at 125%. The public deficit as a percentage of the GDP was 7.2% in 2013. The European Commission forecasts it at 4.3% in 2015. It will have, in other words, violated the deadline of the Council for correction in the context of the excessive deficit procedure. The Irish economy has shrunk by 9% compared to 2009. Its growth prospects are far worse than before the memorandum. The IMF anticipates only a 2% annual GDP increase till 2019. And even worse, the memorandum has cut Ireland's best crop by forcing to emigration over 300,000 people between 2010 and 2013. Of them, about 40% were young, from 15 to 24. It has, in other words, deprived Ireland of about 14% of its labour force. Unemployment was kept at all times below 20%, only through emigration. So this was the success story. This was how you made it here in Ireland. And let me analyze what exactly Troika made it in Greece. According to data of the European Commission, poverty in Greece is today out of control. 34.6% of the population is threatened by poverty and social exclusion. This percentage has increased by 5 percentage points during 2008 to 2012. It is the fourth highest percentage in the European Union, after Romania, Bulgaria, and Latvia. The rate of the working poor is 15%. 6 of 10 citizens fail to visit their doctor because they cannot afford it. 3 million people out of a total of 11 million have no health insurance. 40% of the population saves on food in order to be able to buy medicine. According to the Workers' Confederation Institute of Labour annual report for 2014, at the end of that year, unemployment had reached the level of 61. That's around 30%. It is expected to reach 31.5 in this year, 2014. The life standard of the citizens has got worse by at least 50% compared to 2008 as a result of the salary and pension cuts, but also due to excessive taxation. Domestic demand was fallen by 30.3% since 2009, and in 2013 it went actually back to the 1999 level. In the 4 years of its implementation of the memorandum has sunk the Greek economy into a deep recession. Overall, Greece has lost over 25% of its pre-crisis national income. The memorandum has raised the public debt of our country, of Greece, to an unprecedented and unsustainable level. It has now reached the level of 176% of GDP, and the prediction is that in 2015 will be 205% of GDP. So, this is the situation. Greece is under humanitarian crisis due to the memorandum of austerity, and this is unacceptable figures for a European country. This is a sting to the European civilization. That is what we have accomplished thanks to the memorandum. And I think that these figures, of course with a lot of differences, are both for Greeks and Irish. So, dear friends, it is for all those reasons that we share a common interest in working together and in succeeding. First of all, the retroactive and direct recapitalization of the Irish and the Greek banks by the European Stability Mechanism. Despite the objection of Mr. Schäuble and Mr. Ressling, so that the respective amounts be accepted from the two countries' public debts. And secondly, working together and in succeeding, the realization of Syriza's proposal for a European debt conference. The debt crisis is a crisis of the Eurozone as a whole. It is a European in nature. It is not the sum total of national debt crisis. This is not a Greek debt crisis, this is not an Ireland debt crisis, it is a European one. So the management of the Eurozone debt crisis has transformed, for example in Ireland, a private debt crisis into a public debt problem. At the European Debt Conference, which we are proposing, we should reach an agreement on the operation of the European Central Bank as a lender of last resort, and this will also be on the table. We should give priority to the right of the cancellation of a significant portion of the nominal value of the most over-indebted member states in the Eurozone, as well as to the introduction of a growth clause for the repayment of the remaining debts. That proposal is not a trick. That proposal is not a trick for Europe's North to pay for the South. That proposal is an effort for the Eurozone to get out of the crisis definitely and collectively, so that to get rid of recession and stagnation. If we don't do that, then that would prevent Europe's balance growth. It would also be a permanent systemic risk for Eurozone, a permanent window of market speculation. Dear friends, the fact that there is no success story as a serious and credible political argument regarding Ireland is not something that only I happen to maintain. It is not either something concluded only by your conference. It has been reconfirmed by the official report of the European Parliament on the role of the Troika in the memorandum countries by the two co-reporters. That's why there is no doubt that Troika has no place in Europe. That's why there is no doubt that Troika actually leading Europe to division and polarization. They dissolve social cohesion, they shrink democracy, they spread the humanitarian crisis. They are a point of shame for European civilization. And that's why we have the choice in May 25 to reject the challenge. Dear friends, in the May election, the citizens will decide about Europe and their lives, choosing among three alternative poles. The first pole, let me say, is that of neoliberal no alternative. Do you remember there is no alternative of Mrs. Thatcher? Now, this expression, there is no alternative, belongs to Mrs. Merkel. She is at the head of this pole, of the neoliberal pole, of no alternative. However, in the race of the presidency of the Commission, she is represented by Mr. Jean-Claude Juncker and Mr. Schulz at the same time, the Social Democrat. The Social Democrats who became day by day less socialist and more neoliberal. Mr. Juncker and Mr. Schulz are the ones who were eager to support and practically enforce the disastrous policies of internal devaluation in Europe, the doctrine of austerity everywhere and always. Of course, now that we're in a pre-election period, some of them pretend that they know nothing about the crime. One of those is Mr. Schulz. And I will take the opportunity to ask Mr. Schulz directly. In Greece, he supports and is also supported by PASOK, the party that bears the fundamental political responsibility for the memorandum. And for the reason it has found itself barely alive today, supported only by 3–4% of the electorate. Far away from the 44% in the parliamentary elections of 2009. So, the question to Mr. Schulz is this. Is this policy, the policy that PASOK implemented as a partner in the right-wing government of Mrs. Samaras, is this policy right? The policy of internal devaluation, the policy of labor deregulation, privatizations, and fiscal austerity. Is it right or is it wrong? It must be immediately abandoned. I don't believe that Mr. Schulz will answer my question, but I think that true, we have to put the dilemmas and ask crucial questions throughout the next elections, because it's the first time that the European left plays a crucial role. We are in the field of the fight at the European level, and it's the first time that we could make the questions, even though we don't believe that our opponents will answer these questions. So this is the one pole, the pole of the neoliberal, there is no alternative, but represented by the EPP party and Social Democrats. What's the second pole? The second pole is that of the extreme and populist right and neo-Nazi, unfortunately. These are, let me say, the orphans of Mrs. Merkel's austerity. They pretend to be against the memorandum and against the political system, but it's not true. They make use of the populist political discourse. They hide themselves behind the people, the people's anger, against corruption, against injustice, against poverty and austerity. They hide their own hatred against the other. The left-winger, the heterodox, the Roma, the homosexual. But just because they are hiding and pretending, this is why they are more dangerous. Their political plan is simple and simplistic, returning to the Europe of national antagonisms and confrontations, going back even further than the deep darkness of neoliberalism, going back to the blood of Nazism. However, the peoples of Europe, thanks to their collective memory, I believe that they would never allow them to return. They would never allow the return of fascism in the European continent. Fascists and Nazis will be isolated. But this is the second pole, and we will have to make our arguments not only against the first pole, the pole of the forces that implement the current neoliberal and austerity policies, but also against the threat of neo-Nazism in Europe. And the third pole is our own pole, is the pole of the anti-austerity and European left. Let me say that this is the anti-austerity pole of democracy. European left is a very democratic alternative to neoliberalism. We don't want to dissolve Europe. We want to unite and change Europe. Because the left can, should be, and already is, in Ireland, Greece, and elsewhere, a political force to govern, and believe me, not only to protest, but also to govern, believe me, that is very good for people. We are the only choice for the democratic, ecological, and social foundation of Europe. And let me say the strategic goals which shape our four great political priorities. First political priority, the democratic reorganization of the European Union. Because Europe will not be either social or ecological if it is not democratic. Democracy in Europe is in retreat, and the European Union will either be democratic or will not exist. We should extend the scope of public innovation and popular participation in European policy making. We should restore the fiscal role of national parliaments that has been deprived of by the so-called European semester. There is no such thing as national sovereignty without popular sovereignty, without democracy and the empowerment of its direct and representative institutions. The second priority, the second great political priority, is the ending of austerity in order to end the crisis with growth for Europe. That means immediate end to austerity and coordinated reflation of the European economies. A European New Deal for the balanced and sustainable growth is necessary, so that to create new, steady and decently paying jobs, funding research and innovation, technology and infrastructure. We need to revise the European financial framework to facilitate growth, by giving to the European Central Bank the role of a genuine central bank, making it lender of last resort for member states and not only for banks, by introducing a European Glass-Steagall Act to separate commercial and investment banking activities and risks. The third priority is the gradual ecological transformation of the production process, by guaranteeing, first of all, the full implementation of the European acquis on the environment that would enable us to confront the ecological crisis that the Troika has added to the financial crisis, and also to narrow the sustainability gap between the European North and South. And the fourth priority is to reform of the European legal framework on immigration. This for us means that, among other things of course, a review of the spirit as well as the letter of the so-called Dublin II regulation that would make it possible to tackle the question of the asylum seekers and, in a broader context, the question of immigration as a European human rights issue, with proportional distribution of burdens among all the countries of Europe, through solidarity and not through suppression that produces humanitarian tragedies in the Mediterranean, like this in Lampedusa or like this in Pharmaconis in Egypt. So, dear friends, it's been 2 months since we began. I think that our fight is not a simple fight, it's a very difficult fight, but I'm very optimistic. I believe that the candidacy of the European left or the presidency of the European Commission can only have this meaning: to change our lives by changing Europe. And I'm very optimistic because I know very well that we are carrying in our luggage the people's struggles in our countries and all over Europe for a better life. Thousands of working people, intellectuals and ordinary men and women have sacrificed their lives in those struggles, have sacrificed their lives for a Europe of peace and democracy, for a Europe of human rights, for a Europe of labor and culture. This is the motto, our motto: we create the future by changing the present. Because never before in its post-war history has Europe sunk so deep in the darkness. We don't want this Europe. This is the Europe we're going to change. when they draft memoranda, we draft the future. When they show fear, we give new flesh to hope. Dear friends, allow me to say for the end of my speech tonight a favorite quote of the great American politician of Irish descent, Robert Kennedy, but I think it was not him, it was not his. It was a quote from the great Irish writer and socialist, Bernard Shaw. It says, you see things and you say why, but I dream things that never were, and they say, why not? Thank you very much.